Did you know that Elijah Muhammad published articles in 1933 and 1934, the time when Master Farad Muhammad was still active? Finding primary sources from the time when Master Farad Muhammad was still active has been a very difficult task for scholars. Most of the writings and recordings that pertain to the Nation of Islam's theology and the history of the Nation of Islam usually date back from the 1950s to the 1970s. And this is when the Nation of Islam was at the height of its popularity. This was the Malcolm X era, the Muhammad Ali era, and this is when video really takes off. The sources that academics have relied upon include the Hatem Sahib thesis from 1951, the earlier FBI files, the ones that go back to the 1940s, and also the Beinon article from 1938. And all of these sources gave scholars a look into the earlier years of the Nation of Islam. But these sources also gained the skepticism of believers because these were created by non-members, non-black people, government agents. And in some cases, they do differ in some areas from canonical Nation of Islam teachings. You also have newspaper articles from the 1930s, especially from 32 to 34. Now, these are very useful, but keep in mind that the newspaper, the press, the journalists in those days were a little bit racist. Sometimes they were sensationalizing events related to the Nation of Islam, sometimes they were overtly racist, and they were also focusing on accusations of voodoo, which are just palpably untrue and inaccurate. Recently, a book came out by Medina Muhammad, which collected the notes and letters of her mother, her late mother, Bernstein Sharif Muhammad, the reformer, the secretary of Master Farad Muhammad. And this has been a great resource for scholars. Also, in our latest book, W.D. Farad, The Man, Myth, and Mystery Behind the Nation of Islam, Dr. John Andrew Morrow unearthed two very valuable documents. One is Arna Botem's and Jack Conroy's Notes on the Chicago Temple of Islam, which were written between 1935 and 1939. These were two academics that were writing for an unpublished project, and some of that has been digitized, and then that makes it into our book. There's also the notes or to the ministry class at Temple Number One, Michigan, which dates to December 1934 by Elijah Muhammad. It also goes without saying that the Supreme Wisdom lessons are going to be the centerpiece for any study on the Nation of Islam and Master Farad Muhammad. According to Dr. Michael Muhammad Knight, in his book, The Supreme Wisdom Lessons, A Scripture of American Islam, page 156, the Supreme Wisdom lessons reached mostly canonical form prior to Farad's disappearance in 1934. And that can be proven by the fact that you can find excerpts of the Supreme Wisdom in the newspaper record with very minor differences from 1932 and 1934. Now, a relevant but hitherto overlooked corpus is Elijah Muhammad's newspaper articles from the time before Master Farad Muhammad disappeared. And so in the summer of 1933, Bernstein was apparently writing back and forth to Farad. In a letter dated July 1st, 1933, she writes, quote, "Oh, yes, Prophet. The Afro paper is still publishing Brother Kareem's letters. He sends one approximately every week. Our minister really can compose 100% letters. He is giving them raw Islam now. There doesn't seem to be very many fight backers now. It seems as though they are awakening and anxious for his letters." I believe Bernstein's letters and or this particular letter and the date attributed to it are authentic because there was indeed a letter published on July 1st, 1933 in the Afro-American, which we will see after a few slides. And of course, you can pick up the book on Amazon. This is where you can find the letter that I was just reading from, as well as other letters. Now, Elijah Muhammad's first contribution to this paper appears in January 28th, 1938 edition. And his last contribution under the name Elijah Muhammad, before it was Elijah Kareem, now it's Elijah Muhammad, that appears on April 21st, 1934. But prior to Elijah Muhammad's articles, there was an article published actually by W.D. Farad in 1933, or rather in December 1932. And so he was the first one to actually write for the newspaper. And so here it is on the right. This is Farad's letter. It says, "To the editor of the Afro," meaning the Afro-American, This is to recall your attention to the article in the Afro-American November 25th concerning the voodoo altar murder of Robert Harris, with which we, the Nation of Islam, have brought in question. Robert Harris does not belong to the said Nation of Islam with its branch in Detroit. It is a perfect insult to any Muslim anywhere on the planet Earth to be called a voodoo or cult of some organization. The Nation of Islam, with the religion of Muhammad, inhabits and has inhabited the planet since it has been known to mankind. There is no birth record of Islam. Islam is the father. Two-thirds of the inhabitants on the planet Earth are Mohammedans. Christianity is not the religion of Jesus. Organized Christianity is only 550 years old. And another organization we have in Asia called Buddhism dates back to approximately 33,000 BC. W.D. Farad, Chicago, Illinois. Now, this letter was a disavowal of the 1932 November voodoo murder. It was called voodoo murder in the press. It actually is probably not related to voodoo at all. Notably, it lines up very closely with the Supreme Wisdom, specifically the claim that Buddhism is 35,000 years old. However, it erroneously states that two-thirds of all people are Mohammedans. This figure could not be referring to Muslim population at the time, nor does it line up with the Supreme Wisdom's numbering of original people, who'd outnumber whites 11 to 1. So Farad may have been exaggerating for rhetorical or polemical reasons, as the nation was being accused of being a cult in the press. Internally, of course, Master Farad Muhammad would teach that only 5% of the earth are righteous, the Muslims and the Muslim sons, in other words, the Shriners. Now we get to Elijah Muhammad's first article. Of course, under the name Elijah Kareem, less than a month after his master would publish his first article and his last article in the paper, Elijah would make his first extant contribution to the paper. I will read this out loud here. It says, okay, bring this up. To the editor of the Afro, I read the statement of Mr. W.E.B. Du Bois, or Du Bois, which appeared in the Afro-American the last week of December. A fine statement he made when he said that he did not go to church because he was tired of listening at the same old nothing every Sunday. I read his statement to 10,000 Muslims, and they all gave him a cheer. Christianity teaching has got millions of black people of North America ignorant of the truth. Also, I read a statement of Dr. Woodson in the Afro-American last week concerning the black man entering America by Europe. The black man has been knowing all about this planet, this part of the earth, thousands of years before Indians were here, who was exiled from India 16,000 years ago, through Siberia, over the Bering Strait into Canada, Alaska. These are the people Columbus found here, and these are the black man's brothers. Columbus had about half black man's blood in him and got his knowledge from the black man of the East first before consulting anyone else. Before taking his voyage to this part of the world, he was well aware that the earth was round like a ball. The people that did not know that the earth was round was the European white man. The black man knows every square inch of the earth and has been knowing it for thousands of years before there were any Europeans. The black man of North America need not study white man's history, which dates back only 6,000 years, to find himself. Touching Dr. Woodson's statement about the original black man, all of the great men of the earth, of ancient and of present, were full-blooded black men, or mixed blood. Muhammad himself was a full-blooded black man, and also Jesus, Moses, Alexander the Great, Napoleon the Great were mixed with the black man's blood. Muhammad and his followers were not conquered by white men, and he and his followers did not at the time, and have not at any other time, enslaved any black people. He was a righteous man and celebrated by the greatest part of the human family of the planet Earth. His name is more sacred than Jesus. I can prove to Dr. Woodson or any professor that the Mohammedans outnumber the other religions, especially Christianity, more than 11 to 1. Elijah Kareem. So to comment on this, first, Elijah claims to have read W.E.B. Du Bois' statement to 10,000 cheering Muslims. The statement he's referring to was published on December 24th, 1932, where the Pan-Africanist and civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois said that he did not attend church, quote, because ministers had nothing to say. Ministers have no message for me. Dubois also agreed with the statement that, quote, the present system of religion should be discarded and a new religion based on science substituted. Of course, two aspects of Master Fard Muhammad's teachings that appealed to black people was that one, it was entirely directed toward the black struggle, and two, it was more quasi-scientific and naturalistic than most organized religions. You can find Dubois' article in the newspaper, link there. Uh, yeah. Now, it is doubtful that Elijah was speaking to a crowd of 10,000 Muslims, because according to Bainon, the Nation of Islam was claiming 8,000 members in total in the 1930s, and the Detroit Police Department, also according to Bainon, estimated 5,000 members. And you could read that in Bainon's article. It's unlikely that every registered Muslim attended a lecture by Elijah in January 1933, especially in the wake of the so-called voodoo murder, when the nation was in hot water and Farad had left Detroit. Remember that some members had already left the movement by then because of all the drama, and the Nation of Islam was going through a rebranding at the time. The statements that the Native Americans were exiled from India 16,000 years ago, and that Columbus was half black, and that whites have been on the earth for 6,000 years, these are all consistent claims with what we find in the Supreme Wisdom. Toward the end, Elijah claims that, quote, Muhammad was a full-blooded black man. Now, Elijah Muhammad would later teach that Prophet Muhammad was an Arab of the black nation, but then later again in the Theology of Time, he would say that the Muhammad of 1400 years ago was, quote, a white man. Elijah completes his article by writing that, quote, Mohammedans outnumber the other religions, especially Christianity, more than 11 to 1. This again is from the Supreme Wisdom, and it is probably a reference to, quote, original people rather than a reference to Muslims. You can find Elijah Muhammad's, well, this is a speech, the first link over here, which compiles some of the statements that Elijah Muhammad made over the years about Prophet Muhammad being a black person or from the black nation. And of course, if you want to see the clip of Elijah Muhammad saying that Prophet Muhammad was a white man, you can go to Alam Khan's channel in the second link here. Also, this write-up and others demonstrate that the then Elijah Kareem had studied his lessons closely and was positioning himself as both a leader and Farad loyalist during a time which was very difficult for the nation. It's possible that Farad was reading these articles, we don't know. And if he was, then that means Elijah Muhammad may have been seeking his support. On February 11, 1933, there was a Robert Franklin Stansberry, and he wrote a reply. It was a scathing response to Elijah's January 28th letter. Stansberry argues that, quote, Mr. Elijah Muhammad, who wrote the letter, is wrong when he states that Christianity has got millions of black people ignorant of the truth. Christianity teaches us about Christ, who is the truth. Kind of a circular argument. But anyway, he goes on to say that Mohammedans don't outnumber the Christians according to the World Almanac. Was he using the same almanac that W.D. Farad was using? You can check my video about that. And you can check Robert Franklin Stansberry's article on newspapers.com. It's titled In Answer to Mr. Elijah Kareem's News on Mohammedanism, and that was published February 11th, 1933 in the Afro-American. On April 1st, 1933, Elijah Kareem returned to the press with a special announcement. Quote, Preachers don't know the Bible and must hear the prophet of Detroit, or the prophet in Detroit. To the editor of the Afro, this is to let the people know of the presence of the prophet in Detroit. It is predicted of old, by the prophets of the Bible, that in this present world crisis, this man would come searching for the lost brothers. Many of the people are unaware of his presence and are still looking for him. Let them hear of his works in Detroit and then read and understand the Bible. I will prove to any man in the world, by the Bible and by the work of this man is doing in Detroit, the work this man is doing in Detroit, that he is the one, the last and only friend of the poor, lost, ignorant brother. Do you know that the American Bible is written in symbolic language and that the preachers of my people never have been able to understand it? Though they all profess to know, they do not. To understand it, the preachers should seek this man. No black man in North America should be allowed to preach unless he can read and understand the Quran. the book from which the American Bible came. Moses got it from the Quran, the Jews from Moses, the Greeks from the Jews, the Englishmen from the Greeks, and the Americans from the Englishmen. Thus, the translation was fixed that the poor people would not be able to understand until he comes, and in him all of the hidden mystery is made clear. Elijah Kareem, Detroit, Michigan. While he does not mention his name, it would appear that Elijah was telling readers that the prophet W.D. Farad had returned to Detroit. We know that Farad left Detroit on December 7th, 1932. Remember, he agreed to leave the city. But of course, he would be arrested on May 26, 1933, for sneaking back into Detroit. Unless this was an elaborate April Fool's Day joke, we can reasonably conclude that W.D. Farad was preaching in Detroit, maybe for months, before being rearrested and thrown out again. Is it possible that this article is the reason why the authorities knew that Farad had returned to Detroit? Was Elijah Muhammad's announcement the reason why Farad would have to leave Detroit for good? We can also see that Elijah was claiming that Farad was predicted in the Bible and that he was, quote, the last and only friend of the poor. Elijah then makes a strange statement that the Bible comes from the Quran. This again is in line with the Supreme Wisdom Lessons, which says that the era of the Quran lasts 25,000 years. In fact, the 24 scientists write 25,000 years of history at a time, which may be based on the precessional cycles in theosophy and the great year in astronomy. I have a chapter about this in my book. The next article was published on April 15th, 1933. Quote, Prophet of Detroit says black man is cream of world, not footmat. To the editor of the Afro, come to Detroit and hear for yourself, all of you black people of America, and be convinced that the prophet here is the only friend of the lost brothers. He has come to deliver you and is seeking his lost brothers who have fallen among strangers. And these strangers are the white nation or Caucasians, whose age is 6,019 years old, whose time expired in 1914. Ever since then, his civilization has been crumbling to pieces as the rising powers of the black man grow. We live in the most critical days of the world ever known to mankind or ever will. Every civilized man under the sun is fighting for his own, but the poor black man in North America, who always looks for the white man to fight and help him. But they are disappointed now, and they will be more disappointed when war breaks out. This man is doing the greatest work for the American black people that ever has been since we have been on America's soil. He teaches us who we are, that we are not the footmat of the world, but the cream. He teaches us how to live a clean and intelligent life and answers quickly and fluently every question. He tells the life of all the prophets of old which were before him. Above all, he says that the black man is the father, the first, and the last of all mankind. There is no God but him, on earth and in the space above. He proves this by the works of the black man's wisdom. Elijah Kareem, Detroit, Michigan. Elijah Kareem is again beckoning black people to come and hear the all-knowing prophet in Detroit, Master Farad Muhammad. He echoes the Watchtower idea that the world expired in 1914. He speaks of nations around the world fighting for their independence, and he warns of an impending war, perhaps the War of Armageddon. Lastly, he repeats the famous Supreme Wisdom teaching that the black man is the cream of the earth and the God of the universe. 1 week later, on April 22nd, 1933, Elijah returned with an article. Quote, Who's Christianity? To the editor of the Afro. As I have said, and always will, that our preachers who preach the white man's religion do not understand the Bible in which they preach. The poor believers should stop listening at these preachers until they can prove what they are preaching. I speak not to the white preachers, because Christianity is their religion and not the black man's. What was the gospel of Jesus? Was it not freedom, justice, and equality? Do the modern black preachers preach this kind of doctrine? I should say they do not. Preachers are implicated in politics, directly or indirectly, and sell the people to the devils, the white men, at every election. Elijah Kareem, Detroit, Michigan. Here, Elijah admonishes black preachers and instructs black people to stop listening to Christian preachers. He writes that the true gospel is freedom, justice, and equality. These are the words on the NOI National, which comes from the Young Turks. You can read my article about this But on the right over here is the Young Turks Revolution flag, and you could see that it says حرية عدالة مساواة أخوة اتحاد, which is freedom, justice, equality, and then brotherhood and unity. On June 17, 1933, Elijah Karim warns of the impending Battle of Armageddon. Quote, Battle of Armageddon. To the editor of the Afro, the day has come and the hour is at hand that the poor black man of North America had better hear, and when he has heard, he had better run, and make haste and join hands with his brother, and there cleave together as never before. If we be brothers, then why should we not agree? Are we not the same flesh and blood? Should a man hate that which is his own? But hate and not having love for our own is our greatest trouble, and will cost us our lives in the great battle of Armageddon. Elijah Muhammad, Detroit, Michigan. This is the usual message of unity and millenarianism, meaning end times, that has been consistent throughout the Nation of Islam message. So over here you have the famous blackboard. Which one will survive the War of Armageddon? Christianity or Islam? Now, here is a letter that Bernstein Sharif Muhammad described as, quote, raw Islam on July 1st, 1933. Quote, the Garden of Eden was at Mecca. To the editor of the Afro, for 6,000 years, ever since the devils were cast out of the Garden of Eden or paradise, in which the prophet Farad has said and confirms that this place mentioned in the Bible is no other place than the holy city of Mecca, Arabia. The devil is none other than the Caucasian, and today the white man is forbidden within 50 square miles of the holy city of Mecca, although the devil was not made in the holy city. His father, Yaqub, was born 20 miles from this city in the year of 8400, and began grafting the devil or white man from the black man in the island of Pilan or the Patmos of the Bible. Yaqub was a black man himself, and it has taken him 600 years to graft white out of the black man. Thus, this man, white man, was made weaker, and he was given the name devil because he is wicked. Anything grafted from the original is weaker or wicked. Since this driving out of the devil, he has made every effort possible to destroy the black man and his works. The preachers tell their converts that the devil will burn them in fire after death if they don't believe in Christianity. But this is wrong. No one is burned after death. The devil burns them in the southern states alive. Elijah Karim. This is the last extant letter that Elijah would publish under the name Elijah Karim. He begins with the fantastical claim that the Garden of Eden, paradise, is, quote, is no other place than the holy city of Mecca, end quote. At this point in time, Mecca was a small but bustling pilgrimage town, freshly brought under Saudi Wahhabi rule, with Ottoman architecture still dominant, an economy almost entirely built on the Hajj, and modern change just beginning. It still looked much closer to medieval Mecca than to the vast marble and concrete post-OPEC city that we see today. This is Mecca in 1930. You can look at it yourself. This is the Garden of Eden that Elijah Karim was describing. According to Elijah Muhammad's son, Warath-Din Muhammad, who passed away in 2008, W.D. Farad taught his followers that, quote, the streets of Mecca were paved with gold. What Elijah Muhammad discovered on his visit to Mecca in 1959, however, was little more than a rude awakening. Unpaved roads, unadorned stone edifices, none taller than the 3 stories, and an economy built upon the bazaar trade. Farad's alleged description of Mecca may be the best proof that he never visited the city, but it is also possible that Farad was using symbolic or hyperbolic language in order to attract people to the holy city. Everything in his rhetoric was designed to have his followers look up to the Asiatic world, and so he did not expose them to the flaws of the East. You can find this Warathuddin quote in Ernest Allen Jr.'s book, Religious Heterodoxy and Nationalist Tradition, The Continuing Evolution of the Nation of Islam. That's the name of the article, I should say, but the book is The Black Scholar, The Nation of Islam, 1930 to 1996. And the article is on page 13, and there's the link to the PDF. Elijah makes another mythologized statement, quote, "Today the white man is forbidden within 50 square miles of the holy city of Mecca." Now, we know this is not true. This would come as a surprise to the various European and white-skinned Muslims who make pilgrimage to Mecca every year. Master Fard Muhammad himself was purportedly a light-skinned man with a white mother. Was he in danger of being mistaken for a devil inside his hometown? Did his mother ever go to Mecca? So this is really just proof that Elijah Muhammad was just not right about everything. And I assume he had learned this fact from Master Farad Muhammad, who was either just plain wrong or speaking in very metaphorical and symbolic language. Commentary. The rest of the article deals with the story of Yaqub, and it ends with the ominous statement, quote, "No one is burnt after death, the devil burns them in the southern states alive." Remember that the nation has always held that there is no life after death. And so, with that in mind, it would make no sense to forbear the lynchings that were happening throughout America, and not just the South, during Jim Crow. Now known as Elijah Muhammad, the minister of Islam in North America, he wrote on April 21st, 1934, quote, "We teach ourselves some dumb things too, brother." To the editor of the Afro, awake from that dumb teaching the white man gives you to keep you a slave and to set you against your own brother. So-called Christian preachers, also pastors of America, when will you be wise? There is not a prophet or leader of righteousness who ever appeared on earth, but that the so-called Christian people did not kill or seek his life. Elijah Muhammad, minister of Islam in North America, Hastings Street, Detroit, Michigan. There are contradicting accounts on when exactly Farad left for good, February, March, or June 1934. Farad would write his final canonical letter from the quote southwestern part of North America in March 1934. Bernstein Sharif wrote her final extant letter to W.D. Farad on May 23rd, 1934. But in any case, this article, titled, quote, "We teach ourselves some dumb things too, brother," quote, was published after the University of Islam came under fire from the authorities. The Detroit police accused the nation of contributing to the delinquency of a minor as students were attending the University of Islam instead of public schools. The title of the article was probably not a reference to the University of Islam curriculum. It was, however, published just days after the Nation of Islam scuffled with police upon the arrest of Elijah Muhammad and others. The article ends with the poignant line, quote, "There is not a prophet or leader of righteousness who ever appeared on earth, but that the so-called Christian people did not kill or seek his life." Was Elijah Muhammad trying to say that Master Farad Muhammad's life was in danger? Is that why Farad left? Was Elijah Muhammad saying that his own life was in danger as well? You can read um, so in our book, W.D. Farad, The Man, Myth, and Mystery Behind the Nation of Islam, you can read the contradicting accounts as to when Farad was last seen or heard from. In the Bernstein Sharif Muhammad book, The Reformer, Wisdom Revealed to Me by Master Farad Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam, you can see um, from page 64 the Bernstein Sharif article, or letters, rather. And then, of course, if you want to see the newspapers.com article on 13 policemen hurt battling voodoo band, their name for the Nation of Islam, that was reported in the Detroit Free Press on April 19th, 1934. In conclusion, it is unclear why the Afro-American did not publish any more papers written by Elijah Muhammad after this one. Perhaps Elijah stopped writing pieces for the newspaper. Perhaps the newspaper did not want to be involved in the Nation of Islam's drama. But newspaper digitization has immortalized these articles, which are a reflection of the Nation of Islam's infancy years. They're very, very important. And the information in these pieces regurgitate Farad's most central doctrines as taught in the Supreme Wisdom lessons. They also show how Elijah Muhammad took initiative. He stayed on the offensive. He played a key role in bringing people to the Nation of Islam, even while Farad was still active. Did Elijah Muhammad foresee a time when he would have to run the nation without his master? Did Farad approve of these articles before they were sent out? We don't know. But we do know that Elijah Muhammad would faithfully persist in these teachings for the near half century remaining of his life. Thanks for watching. Check out our book. I'll post a link in the description. WD Farad, The Man, Myth, and Mystery Behind the Nation of Islam by John Andrew Morrow and Bilal Muhammad. And as usual, I bid you all farewell. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.